Most people are driven by their emotions. They drive everything about us. And so this is hard to teach a lot of people, and this is the hardest thing for me to teach, but it's really good. I hate had a gap last week between, we were on week 4. Last week we talked about things of what drives your emotional state. Anybody know what drives your emotional state? What's that? What I focus on? My self-talk and my body physiology, right? That purely drives my emotional state. So my physiology, right? My self-talk and what I focus on. So if I focus on the positive, I tend to have more positive things. Focus on the negative, I tend to be more negative. Makes sense? And so that's what drives my emotional state. We'll talk today, this is powerful for anybody, for myself even going through it. Your emotional home. What do you think that means? This is where you go to emotionally the majority of the time. So there's like a specific definition, we'll call this EH from emotional home. So you may run out here to happiness because something cool happened, so you got to deal, but what do most people tend to do? Run right back here to where they were before negativity, wherever it may be. Then everybody has a different place. That's what I'm talking about. So I'll give you the definition. Your emotional home is the emotional state or set of emotions you consistently return to regardless of external circumstances. It's your default emotional pattern, shaped by past experiences, beliefs, and habits. Much like a physical home, your emotional home is where you feel most comfortable, even if that comfort zone involves negative emotions like anger, stress, or anxiety. What does that mean, you think?
It's kind of like depression. It's a crappy feeling, but it's so hard to get out of this. It's what you're used to.
It's deep. We'll talk today about how to deal with, the main topic kind of that today really is how do I deal with and navigate difficult emotions. This is powerful kind of stuff. And I realize that my one thing today is to take this kind of higher level. That's a little deeper, harder to teach. But I want you guys to all remember that we all have this emotional home that you return to no matter what. Some are super happy. Here's the thing. You ever met anybody, right, that you know that no matter what happens to them, no matter what happens goes on, they still find a way to get upset? Yeah. They still find a way to get angry. They still find a way to have victimhood. Anybody like that? Right? A lot more than you know, right? And I'll talk about what shapes that in a minute, and it goes deep in a way. But on the flip side, right, how many of you guys know somebody, no matter what, they find a way to be grateful? They find a way to be energetic and have a good attitude. Much more rare than the ones that go negative, right? Why do you think that is? What's that?
It's harder.
Yeah.
It's hard to find positivity in life, and it's hard to stay on the right side of it.
Mentally, this breaks down. We'll break down the types of emotions, but most of this is all driven by the past. So if I have trauma, what happens is it shapes the way that I look at things. If my parents were super negative about things, what are the chances I'm negative? Very, right? Almost identical. And so the problem with the reason that, and kind of like what JJ's saying, is kind of true, not really true, but the thing is, if I'm 40 years old, or 30 years old, even 25 years old, there's a pretty good chance that some negative happened to you. And so from a survival mechanism, what does our mind tend to remember most? The negative stuff. Why? So your mind really will magnify some of the negative traumas we had in our life to protect you from that happening again. The problem is it tends to hold you in a negative emotional home, which is crazy. Does that make sense to you guys in a way? And so that's the key part. I want you guys to think about this. Of what do you think your true emotional home is? Honestly. What do you default to? And to think about today, what you guys look at as we go kind of deep in this is what do you think drives that? What part of your childhood, right? For me, a great example is financially. Some of you guys may be like this. Financially, I struggled for a very long time. My parents, guess what they fought about my entire life? Money. Guess what ultimately led to a divorce? Money. Then I was 17, started my first job right as soon as I could, my first real person job at 18, and guess what I struggled with? Money, right? Put myself in a pretty decent time, sure, put myself through college, was still tight on money. Then all of a sudden I got in real estate, had a bartender at night for 2.5 years till 4 in the morning, and sell real estate. And so guess what? I had so much emotional trauma from money and finances. I had this saying in my head, if I can just get to X amount, first it's $100 grand. If I just get $100 grand in the bank, I'll feel good. Right? What do you have when I got $100 grand? No, I think I still felt that pain and that trauma. And so then I got to $1 million in the bank. That was a long time ago for anybody who worked here. I was 28 years old. And so guess what happened? Nothing. I still felt what? Fear and trauma. And so the reality is you can carry a trauma or issue for so long, what happens is it tends to bleed over. And so part of that understanding of what drives that, what brings that, and the way we can fix that trauma, that issue, is to investigate that and go deeper and look at what are those things that drive us. And so I can do that with that because you got to figure, okay, if that still drives me, no matter what, you'll never be there. Make sense? And I told the story last week at the mastermind at dinner. There's a guy in my warrior group who's worth like, I don't know, $50, $60 million, maybe more than that. He has his own family office, which means like you manage his investments. And I was like, you manage this for somebody else? Like, no, it's my own family office. And we kind of got this emotional part. He broke down. He started crying. Basically, he said, man, I first thought when I got to $1 million that everything would be good and I'd be fine. I got to $1 million and what happened? Nothing. He said, well, I get $5 million, everything will be fine. I got $10 million, it'll be fine. Got $30 million, $40 million, $50 million. And he said, I got $50 million and realized that I just sacrificed, so many wrong things, including my relationships, that I looked back, I had everything I ever needed at less than $1 million. The problem was what? The emotion behind it. And so the key thing about investigating, that doesn't mean money doesn't help, and obviously it's very, very much to have $40 million and just be aware. And that way things can work. And him and I are talking about that overall. And so that's something to look at. And so once you guys think about that part of it, how many of us still stress with that? For most people, even if your external circumstances change, you always return to your emotional home. I'll say that again. For many people, if your external circumstances change, you always return back to your emotional home. What does that mean?
Default.
Yes.
Default.
You default back to it. And all this is driven in your childhood to even your adulthood. That's the problem. So all this carries from any actual trauma. And it could be like your parents had a lot of money, but what are your thoughts about money? The opposite of mine, they think it's bad. They don't really want money, right? Where there's different things based on how you brought up. That's why you see a lot of like super wealthy, rich kids will tend to be super unhappy and many commit suicide, right? Because why? They have the right perspective. Their emotional home is driven by trauma on the opposite side of the spectrum. And so what I share is everyone has trauma and issues and things. We just got to be able to investigate the emotions behind it, and that way I can address it and fix it. Does that make sense? This is about emotional mastery. Some deep stuff, but it's very important to look at. So I want you guys to ask yourself this. What's your emotional home? Honestly, looking back, like what's your emotional home? Sadness, anger, jealousy, envy, happiness, joy, passion, hunger. Like what is it you think that drives the most? And write down. Like think about it. And it's anything today to just kind of work through, right? But like the good news is you can change it. Bad news is it takes a little bit of work. Right? Because why? You have all this conditioning, all these things that happen in your entire life as you grow up that's driving the way you think, the way you look at things. And so the good news is if you want to find happiness and success, you can do both. You just got to make sure I can master what?
Emotional home.
My emotions, right? And so I want you guys to write down the key aspects of emotional home. This is how humans operate. Number one, they operate familiarity over happiness. Familiarity over happiness. What does that mean, you think?
Going back to the default again.
Yes. Why?
That's how you're brought up.
It's like some people are happier to be angry than they are to actually be happy. Think about that, right? That's how Garrett talks about it. He enjoys just fighting and being angry and going through it, right? I'm not going to say it, but what drove me for most of my career was anger in a way. Because I wanted to prove all the people wrong. All the people said I couldn't do so. Then I got in business and all the agents hated on me. This young kid coming up. They all talk. So I figured, you know what? I'm going to make it. I'm going to beat all y'all. Be number one, and then all of a sudden they like and respect me. Then what do you think happened? They hate me even more, which is crazy, right? You're like, this is crazy. What the hell? So it's one of those things that's just how life works, but you gotta look at what really drives me in that part. And so it's important to break down. So here's the deal. People unconsciously gravitate towards familiar emotional states. Even if those emotions are not healthy or empowering. For instance, someone may feel at home in frustration because that's the way they experience life the most. And so it's important for us to really take some time to investigate, okay, where do I spend my time the most at? Triggered, angry, right? Watch a lot of people on the left lately, right? What's happened the past 4 or 5 years? Political rhetoric goes up. Certain people on both sides, right, are triggered all the time, which angry, and so their emotional home is living on this place of just anger and frustration, right? And so it's important to understand like how many people are manipulated by things outside that. Number 2, habitual patterns. These are key aspects of the emotional home. Habitual patterns. What does that mean, think? So emotional homes are built through repeated patterns of thought, behavior, and reaction. If someone consistently reacts to challenges with self-doubt, that becomes part of their emotional home. Now, What do you think drives that one the most? Life experience, but particularly what? Childhood. So if your parents tell you you're never enough, you're always messing up, you're terrible at what you do, right? That's how you see generational poverty go from generation to generation, typically in the habitual part. So if I grew up in a household that had lots of chaos and arguing, what do I tend to do the most? Chaos and arguing, right? It just happens all the time. It comes back to subconscious habitual patterns in terms of what you do. And so most of that comes from childhood. That's okay. We all realize, hey, most of us came from some type of childhood. Even if it wasn't, we feel like it was in many cases. But you compare it to somebody else, it's not even close, right? And so that's something to look at overall. Number 3, choice and responsibility. Choice and responsibility. What does that mean, you think?
You can, if you work on it, you can change your emotional state probably through your subconscious life to train your subconscious.
Yep, you got to retrain the subconscious. So while emotional homes are influenced by past experiences, we have the power to consciously rebuild our emotional homes by developing new habits and new mindsets. Now the key part is here, I will teach you guys a framework to go through, but number 1, the first step of today, what do you think the goal is here? To be aware of it, right? That's the first step to change anything. But the 3 main things that drive it, I'll say it again, familiarity over happiness, right? Habitual patterns, and then choice and responsibility. And so, and it's so true, I thought about this, and I'm guilty of this sometimes, is like, and I've felt crazy for many times, but frustrated people get frustrated no matter what you do. And one of the guys I was talking about this, he said, you can take a frustrated person to a 5-star resort, and guess what happens?
They complain.
They're complaining frustrated. I ain't gonna let that happen to me before. I get to this nice resort, my room's not the view I wanted to have, and I flew all the way here, got all this, got all this money, and now all of a sudden I got like the garden view, right? Whatever it is. And so that's what I had to train myself the last few years on vacation to not be like that, because I expected excellence in this world, and all of a sudden it becomes a way. But is it expectation of excellence, or is it, well, that's constantly frustrating? And so part of it's investigating what that is, but you can take a person with gratitude who's happy about things, take them to a small 2-star resort or a 5-star resort, guess what they have experienced? Happiness and gratitude.
They're just happy to be there.
And it all comes from what? Their emotional home. And so it's important for us to realize and look at these triggers, what they are. And so here's a key way it breaks down overall most people, right? The key principles. I want you guys to write down that trauma usually plays the biggest part to this. So there's something typically happens in what they do. And we learn about a lot of this in our warrior stuff. And where they tend to always go back to? Their trauma. And they came up, and that trauma is holding on to. And so what they do with that process is they release that trauma, and all of a sudden they feel free from it in many cases. All the big business guys and warrior stuff do it. What you do is they're dealing with trauma. Does that make sense? Sure. That's when they're experimenting. And that same thing was experimented through one of the big national colleges. I can't remember who he posted about it. He saw on Twitter recently. Long story short, one of the things that drives your emotions is trauma. Why is that important to talk about? Because you got to look at it, right? For me, one of the biggest traumas of my life is my parents get divorced, they find out money, things happen. So I got to understand that's something that's a gift. But at the same time, you got to make sure the gift won't take you so far. Make sense? And so I can't live in that place of fear from that start. And so here's the thing. Key principles. I want you guys to write this down. I am in control. I am in control. That's the only one you take from today. I am in control. What does that mean? Most people have been in autopilot of emotions that are driving your entire life from your childhood and the previous 10 or 15 years without even actually knowing it. The reason I want you to go back to today is investigate how do you feel most of the time. Do I feel frustrated? Do I feel not enough? Do I feel whatever it is? And some of that can be good. So I feel like I'm not enough, or I feel like I'm not doing enough. That's what drives you to be successful. Does that make sense? And so that's your gift, but it can also be your curse. It's important to know I can be able to adjust it a little bit if I want to. And so here's the thing. Emotions are like flashlights. What does that mean, you think? We can turn them on and off based on our decision how we do things. Biggest problem is most people aren't aware of it. They're driven by their internal thinking it's the external, meaning that everything you see on the outside automatically defaults them back to wherever that emotion is. For example, going to a 5-star resort and still being frustrated. The service isn't good enough. Things aren't great. Whatever it is. That's something that drives it. Make sense? There's some on the trip last week that were triggered by a lot of things. In a beautiful place in a $20 million house. Right? And so that goes back to what? Emotional home. And so it's important to look at those things. And so there's no such thing as good or bad emotion, right? You just got to make sure you're able to investigate what it is. And so then goes simple things, right? So fear might be a signal of danger. Anger might be a signal of a boundary violation. But here's the thing. The role of emotions Emotions aren't inherently good or bad. They serve as vital signs about your inner and outer world. What does that mean, you think? I'll write this down. This is your biggest takeaway.
Well, it all depends on how you react to them.
Emotions are the bridge between thought and action. That's where the pieces start to come together. What does that mean, you think?
Dictate what actions you're gonna have.
I'm having to consider some of those emotions you're having are good. If you're angry at yourself, or feel like you didn't do enough, or you have some guilt or shame, guess what that is? That's the flashlight being turned on and say, hey, you know what? You probably didn't do what you're supposed to do. Makes sense? Now, I don't want to be driven by that all the time, but I do want to be able to investigate that emotion in a certain moment and figure, okay, why am I feeling that emotion? Is there something that I'm happening I'm not in alignment? Does that make sense? So, for example, if I know that I need to have these things here, and I don't show up, I don't make the calls, I don't push for the appointment, and I feel frustration or anything afterwards, is there a reason for that?
Yeah.
Yeah, typically, it comes down to the bridge between my thought, knowing I should do it, and the action of actually doing it. And the only way for me to escape that going forward is to actually do what? Change the action. Do what I know I'm supposed to do. And so the biggest problem, most people when they have bad emotions or strong emotions, it means they're not in alignment. Meaning between what I want to do and what I say I do is not actually in line with what I actually do. And that's a big thing for me to understand and go through. Make sense here? Questions about that? Yeah. That's something. There were two brothers, right? Dad was an alcoholic, went to jail. One was an attorney who didn't drink. One was an alcoholic, went to jail. Both the reasons was their father, right? And there's two sides of that. Both had different trauma. Yeah. So one was driving the guy to be successful. One was driving the guy to be destructive. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so people have this different association, different stories. So I'm going to get to that in a minute. It all comes down to the story you have about the trauma. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to give you guys 10 questions at the end to kind of tell you how to look at that. But yeah, I mean, it depends how you reacted to it. Some people with money are really successful because their parents have money. Some people are successful because their parents have money. Make sense? There's just two sides of the coin. It depends on what it is. The most important thing I want you guys to take from it, just be able to investigate it based on what your stories are, your associations. Does that make sense? Or no?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's the key. So, and I'll clear it with you. So, there's layers of emotions. We get into the next thing you're talking about. So, there's layers of emotions. Number one is the primary emotion. What does that mean? You think the primary emotion?
The first thing you think about.
So my primary emotion is number one. Like, it's crazy, it gets later. This isn't deep to try to teach you guys. That's good though. The primary emotions are the universal instinctive shared by all humans regardless of culture, experience. Those include fear, joy, sadness, anger. They arise very quickly based on stimulus. What do you think that means? So the primary ones are the instant ones. Those are typically driven by stimulus. So if something bad happens to me, boom, instinct fear, which allows me to do what? Back up, away from danger, right? And so these are the basic ones that everybody's driven by, which are survival mechanisms based on how we've evolved as humans. Make sense? And so a loud noise triggers fear, activates the body's defense mechanisms, right? Whatever it is. Now it starts to get more complex as you get different layers. Second layers are what we call secondary emotions. What do you think those are? This is where it gets to, we're talking about what page I'm on. This is primary, primal, right? This is my primal instinct. Secondary, those are more complex, shaped by personal experiences, culture, individual beliefs,